Charles Wolf Drimel is the Waters Program Coordinator for the Greater Yellowstone Coalition. He's been a wilderness instructor and guide for numerous organizations, and has a BA and a master's in environmental studies and a master's in ecopsychology. Charles, welcome to the program.
Thanks for the invitation to be here, Joe, and thanks, Explore Big Sky.
Yeah, well, very much appreciate having you with us. First off, briefly, if you could, just tell me tell me about ecopsychology and how does that relate to the work you're doing?
Well, thanks for the curveball. It's I don't know if it speaks directly to development and stewardship of the Big Sky area and the Gallatin River, which is really the work that I'm focused on right now professionally. But ecopsychology is the focus and study of how human health relates to the natural world around us, and perhaps to take it a step further, how the health of the natural world is related to human health as well. There's three main components of it. I'd say advocacy is one component, just kind of personal health and well-being on a psychological level is another component. And then there's some eco-psychologists that study this on a spiritual level as well. We could probably spend the program talking about eco-psychology, but maybe another chapter of a town hall sometime in the future.
Sure, absolutely. Now, I was just curious, and I appreciate the answer. And, you know, it does tie in, I would think, in a lot of different ways, people's experience in the outdoors, in, you know, in ecosystems. You know, when you were at Dartmouth, you studied abroad in Zimbabwe and South Africa. How did that shape your experience, you know, and your view of the outdoors?
Well, it shaped my experience on a number of levels. First and foremost, it exposed me to all the amazing wild places that we still have on this planet. It also exposed me to how different countries choose to manage those resources. One of the pieces of work that I was doing while I was over there was looking at the difference between two of the largest national parks in Zimbabwe and South Africa, and that being Hwange National Park in Zimbabwe and Kruger down in South Africa. South Africa is, you know, what people might call a second world country in terms of its resources, wealth, and level of development, and Zimbabwe is more of a third world country. And it shows, and in terms of the financial resources that are available for the management of those two parks, which really had very comparable resources when it comes to wildlife, wild places, rivers, etc. So one thing it really taught me is how important it is to have people connected with finances to support conservation from different parts of the world. They're not, these conservation efforts, whether they happen at our level within the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem or at the level in Zimbabwe and South Africa, they don't live on their own. They are intimately connected to people who care about these places in Europe and Asia and the United States as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back here. Talk a little about, you know, Greater Yellowstone Coalition, you know, your position and the work that you guys are doing right now.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So for those who are watching this and aren't familiar with the Greater Yellowstone Coalition, we were formed in 1983 to protect the lands, waters, and wildlife of the 20 million acre Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which forms a lot of southern Montana and southwest Montana, eastern Idaho, and northwest Wyoming. A lot of people consider it the largest nearly intact temperate ecosystem in the world. And over the years, we've worked on a number of conservation projects related to land, water, and wildlife issues, from grizzly bear and bison conservation to protecting wild places from poorly proposed mines, to working on water issues and protecting free-flowing rivers and clean water in our Wild and Scenic Rivers program. And that's something that I could perhaps speak to a little bit more in detail if the timing is right for you, Joe.
Yeah, of course. Well, that leads me right to it. What is a wild and scenic designation, and how does that work within the Montana Headwaters Legacy Act?
Yes, right now, the Great Yellowstone Coalition works with a bunch of partners under a broader coalition called Montans for Healthy Rivers. There's conservation groups and businesses and private landowners that are all part of this. And for about 10 years, we've been working to first identify iconic streams throughout the state that are worthy of this wild and scenic river protection, and then work on the local level with community members to protect these free-flowing streams. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act was established in 1968 by Congress and passed by the president at that point in time, and it does three main things. It protects the free-flowing nature of a stream. So a entity could not apply through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, also known as FERC, to build a dam or a major water storage project on the river. And then it also protects the clean water, or enhances the clean water of that stream segment. Then last, the act protects what are called outstandingly remarkable values, which is a really congressional wonky term for what makes that river special in that place. And those can be a number of things, such as recreation opportunities for locals, or recreation opportunities for tourists from out of the region. It can be wildlife habitat associated with that river, scenery, native fish populations, cultural values such as Native American heritage associated with that region, or settler heritage associated with that region. Mm-hmm. And basically, after a river is designated with the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, a managing land agency, usually in our area it'd be like the U.S. Forest Service, they're tasked with reviewing projects that have some kind of federal nexus to make sure that any project proposed doesn't impact the free-flowing nature of the river, the clean water, or one of those remarkable values that I mentioned.
Sure. Well, bring us up to speed to now. You guys are making a concerted effort. I mean, you have been for 10 years, but right now is an important time for Southwest Montana.
Yeah, it is. We've, like I said, for 10 years, our partners within Montans for Healthy Rivers have been doing a ton of outreach across the state to build local support and hear from local businesses and local landowners what streams they think should be protected under this act. Through that period, we pooled all of these different voices together across the state to create draft legislation. And then through review and feedback from our congressional delegation back in Washington, D.C., we've continued to narrow the scope of that to try to create draft legislation that is socially and politically feasible. And right now we have, I'd call it a really inspiring product, and that's the Montana Headwaters Legacy Act, which would protect 17 river segments across the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and the Smith River system, a total of 336 river miles. The Gallatin River is included in that, as is the Taylor Fork. Just over the divide, the Upper Yellowstone and Bear Creek are part of that. And as you head further to the east, some really popular rivers like the Boulder and the Stillwater are incorporated in that. And over the years, through our outreach, we've just built support from a real diverse group of people, from Siboney Stillwater Mining Company, who operates right on the Stillwater, to developers up in Big Sky, to outfitters and guides and whitewater paddling companies and fishing companies. The Montana Outfitter Guides Association recently endorsed this legislation this year. In the past, Fishing Outfitters Association of Montana. We also have a ton of private landowners along places like the Gallatin and the Upper Yellowstone. So, you kind of ask, who don't we have? And it's hard to point really in any direction. We've worked with the agricultural community as well, because we know clean water upstream is really good for ag producers downstream. We've really intentionally tried to not leave anyone out. And I should mention tribes too, who of course have, this historical connection to this place. The Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council, made up of 12 tribes throughout the ecosystem, have all endorsed this in past years. So right now we feel like we have momentum in our favor, and we have this little narrow window left in this congressional session before the election really heats up, where there's an opportunity to get a bill introduced and maybe even had a hearing in the US Senate. So we're all hands on deck to try to work with Senator Daines and Senator Tester to see the Montana Headwaters Legacy Act introduced in that time period.
Yeah, well, that's really exciting and a lot of work. I mean, you mentioned to me that, this past spring, a survey indicated that 72% of those surveyed supported the act.
It was actually higher. It was 79%. So we'll say 8 out of 10 Montanans. Is statistically significant poll conducted through the University of Montana by 2 bipartisan pollers from the Denver area, one that usually works with Republicans, the other works with Democrats. And you have all of the proposed policy or existing policy in Congress right now that comes out of Montana. The Montana Headwaters Legacy Act had the strongest support, which in my mind shows that rivers really unite Montanans. Historically, people will say, there's a lot of fighting that goes on about water itself and water rights, but when it comes to protecting these amazing river resources that we have, we've found time and again that people are really united about it, regardless what industry they work in, regardless of what part of the state they live in. And so, we also have, I should mention, recent history of our delegation working together, and that is Representative Gianforte, Senator Steve Daines, and Senator John Tester, all passing the East Rosebud Wild and Scenic Rivers Act in 2018, which was a small standalone river segment where a dam was proposed on East Rosebud Creek in the Beartooth Mountains. Yeah. But showed even there you have bipartisan support.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, aside from, East Rosebud, which you mentioned, the last major waterway package was, through this was passed in 1976. And, you've been working on this for more than 10 years. What are the chances of this legislation going forward before the election in November?
I think there's a chance. My crystal ball doesn't work well. If it was up to me, this would have been introduced a while ago, but I'm not a senator. I'm just working my butt off behind the scenes to unite Montanans and show the support that we have. So I have a lot of confidence that when this bill will be introduced, that Montanans, even more Montanans, will come out of the woodworks and say, like, hell yeah, let's do this. This is awesome. This is awesome for the Gallatin River. This is great for the Taylor Fork, the Yellowstone. These are places that are sources of pride. They're great for our economy, of course, but all of us who live here, we want to see these places remain as they are. We want for our kids and for our grandkids. Mm-hmm. I believe that our leadership understands that as well.
You talked about bipartisanship, Charles. 2020, as we all know, has been a hell of a year. COVID, wildfires, hurricanes, I don't know what's next. It seems like the bad news keeps on coming. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel in your mind with this particular act?
I think Joe, you're pointing to something special here, and that is that this could be really good news for Montanans. And I can't tell you that it's going to happen in 2020, unfortunately, but I do think that Montanans and Americans in general are looking for more good news, more good stories of success. Conservation in general has really united Americans. We've seen all kinds of policy passed in the last few years in the Trump administration that has been natural resource conservation policy, and it's brought both sides together from the political spectrum. And I think we're just hungry for more of it. When the pandemic, was at its peak this past spring and early summer, Montanans were all over the rivers. It's talk about ecopsychology. I think a lot of us, it's therapy, it's a respite, it's a reprieve from a lot of the toxic news and things that are happening around us. We need them, and we need these places as they are. So I have hope. I'm naturally an optimistic person. I'll be frank there, but that said, I'm realistic, and I am hopeful here that in the future we'll see this legislation come to fruition in Washington, D.C.
Well, you guys are doing some really good work, Charles.
Well, thank you.
Quickly, is if people want to get involved, how would they do that? What can people, our audience, what can anyone do?
Yeah, I would say the first thing to do is check out our coalition website, which is healthyriversmt.org. Again, that's healthyriversmt as in Montana.org. And then there's a wealth of information on the website, including maps and some history of our campaign. But the second thing that you could do is call Senator Tester and Senator Daines and ask them to co-sponsor this bill in the Senate, and tell them who you are and where you live and why it's important to you. I think that's just, they need to hear more from Montanans to move forward.
Well, Charles Drimel, it's been a pleasure, really. Thank you for coming on the show.
Likewise, thanks for the invitation. I look forward to hearing from other speakers.